Welcome to Between State Lines.
Welcome back to Between State Lines and episode 42, part 2 of this is my first night alone in my house and it is not going well. I believe that's the full title. I've lost it.
I think so. I think that was it.
So here is part 4. Last night was terrible. Things have taken a weird turn. Last night was bad. I'm laying in bed and have been for most of the day. I am 100% emotionally spent at this point. I feel so bad. I almost didn't update, but I couldn't leave you guys hanging like that. I just want explanations. I am so tired of not knowing what's happening. I put off talking to Will about everything until we were able to sit down with Steve yesterday afternoon. The general consensus has been that Steve should be present, which I agreed with. So Steve was there to help me tell Will everything. At first, he seriously thought we were trying to pull some kind of prank on him. It took some convincing for him to realize we were telling the truth. Then he got upset, like I knew he would, that I hadn't told him what had been going on while he was gone. After the three of us talked extensively about it, we decided not to get the cops involved yet, not until we have solid evidence to balance out some of the more unnatural things. This whole conversation took place around the kitchen table in our house, and we spent last night here in our house as well. Will didn't want us to be run out of our own home, as he put it, and I couldn't expect him to be experiencing the same amount of uneasiness I'd been feeling for the first few days. This is all secondhand news to him, and while I know he trusts Steve and I'm sure it was hard to process. I know he's trying to take a logical standpoint, like he does with any sort of crisis, but I also know the whole thing unnerves him. He did agree the lights and trail camera were a good idea. I probably wouldn't have been able to stay in the house without them. Steve helped him install everything yesterday afternoon. There's now a new light in the kitchen by the back door, out on the back deck along the south deck, where the house got smacked, and one on the front deck. We decided to put the camera up along the backyard fence. There's about 3 yards of clearing between the fence and the tree line. Anything that comes into the clearing should get picked up by the camera. I wanted to try to put up some harmless booby traps around this place, like a few readers suggested. Not something to catch the thing, but to indicate if anything had been close to the house. Will talked me out of it. We have the camera and extra lights, and he's home now. I think he feels like it's his job to protect me and the house. Steve had dinner with us and went home. Danny is still at his place. As hard as I tried, I could not coax her to leave with me. She'd been a basket case for several days now, and she was so anxious I didn't have the heart to force her to come home. Steve brought her some mild sedatives from work, and that seemed to take the edge off for her. He told us to let her stay for a day or two, and hopefully she returned to her normal self and want to come back home. He's a vet, after all, so we agreed that was for the best. He says she's been cuddling a lot with him and his two dogs, and it's hard to not feel a little hurt. My dogs are like my kids, and suddenly the middle child doesn't want to be home with us. I know better than to blame Danny, but it doesn't do much for the resentment I feel towards whoever or whatever has decided to disrupt our lives. Will and I carried on as normal yesterday afternoon or evening. We avoided any more talk about the things that occurred in his absence. After we cleaned up the kitchen from dinner, we went to the couch and watched a movie. During the movie, we opened a bottle of wine, and I had probably had way too much, but it felt nice to loosen up for a change. With Will back, it was easier to unwind a little. I let Nina and Big Ben outside once more before bed, and they were quick about it again. After they came in, I went around checking each door and window, securing the curtains in place. Will watched me do this, looking a little bit bemused, but didn't say anything. I climbed into bed and sat down to reply to the comments from you guys. I have to admit that by that time I was a little tipsy on wine. I think it was about 11:30 p.m. here when I called it a night and laid down to sleep. I must have been out within a few minutes. When I woke up, I was really disoriented. It was hot, stuffy, and I was having a really hard time placing the time and day. It was pitch black, and only when something stirred at my feet did I comprehend that my dumbass was completely under the blankets. Something nudged my shoulder gently, and I remembered Will was back. I poked my head out from under the blankets for a breath of fresh air. It was so dark in the room that I could barely tell if my eyes were open or closed. Will was nothing more than a dark blob against a dark backdrop. Amelia, he said, are you awake? Was all I could answer. A glance at my clock revealed it was just about 2 in the morning. I went to go back to sleep. My head felt heavy and kind of hurt. Yay, alcohol. Are you okay? He asked. Mm-hmm. I reached down and felt for Big Ben. My hand found his shaggy coat, and I felt quite content. I don't think at that point I even remembered weird things had been happening. You were mumbling in your sleep, Will told me. Sorry, I said. It's okay. It didn't really register at the time how concerned he'd been. This next bit, I've had to have Will help me piece together. The next time I woke up, it was at the awful sound of a scream. Just before the screaming, I heard someone call my name. Only it wasn't my name. I can't really explain it, but it woke me up. I was in an instant state of terror and confusion. A light was blinding me. I remember realizing in shock that the scream was mine coming from my own mouth. I wasn't in bed or even laying down. I was on the front deck facing the woods. I had no recollection of having gotten there. I had set off the motion light, so it was hard to see much. Something hit the back of my leg rather hard. I stopped screaming. I was just hyperventilating. I glanced down to see Big Ben pawing at my legs and feet, but I felt too scared to move. I don't think I've ever felt more vulnerable in my entire life. I was facing the tree line even though I couldn't make out much but dark objects in the darkness. I was sure something was moving between the trees. Then there was a tug on my shirt. Big Ben had the hem in his mouth and he was shaking it in his teeth. He seemed almost panicked. Now that I was more fully awake, I didn't need any coaxing to go back inside. I turned to book it back and ran smack into Will. He looked frightened, and he was carrying the revolver. He quickly slammed the door behind me and locked us all back in. I was shaking all over and just wilted to the floor and started crying. Will sat on the floor with me, making attempts to soothe me, but I couldn't stop sobbing. He kept telling me I had just been dreaming, but I knew what happened wasn't normal. I have never slept walk in my life or had a night terror, but it seemed I just experienced both of those things in the same night. I don't even recall what set me off screaming. Big Ben sat beside us, periodically licking my tears from my face. Will just sat with me while I cried everything out. I don't think he knew what to say. I rarely cry, and here I was bawling my eyes out. I felt very much threatened by this thing, now more than ever. Something caused me to go wandering beyond the safety of the house, unprotected, into the gaping maw of darkness outside. I feel like I lost all control, like my own body betrayed me. Yeah, I think she's definitely, it's definitely her.
I mean, something's going on,
Gotta be.
but I don't know. I still not fully convinced that it's not the dog.
Could be. I don't know. I feel like I don't know. I think it's
Something's
something with
going
her.
on, and I feel like whatever it is like luring her out there.
What if she is like part of a werewolf clan and she's like, they're calling her home?
Or it's like a bee and she's just being like called back to the hive when she's unconscious.
Yeah, there was a wasp in the house today, and I killed it. It's great.
Really? You're so brave. I don't know what happened to the yellow jacket that was in my room. Never did find it.
It's still in there with you.
Whatever. Doesn't seem to bother me now.
Will eventually coaxed me back to the bedroom. I barely remember this, and got me to settle down. Big Ben stretched out in the bed and rested his head on my stomach while I laid there, trying to calm myself. Nina was at the side of my bed, looking concerned. She eventually climbed onto the bed with me, curling up in the tiny spot at my feet. Will settled back into bed, and apparently I nodded off pretty quickly. I'm surprised I fell back asleep so fast. I must have been exhausted. I had another dream, a good one though. The same dream as a few nights ago when that warm, shaggy something was laying across my body. No creepy figure in the doorway this time. But when I woke up, it was daylight. Will was sitting in the bed with his laptop, and Ben hadn't moved from my side. After I woke up a little, I asked Will to tell me everything that had happened. He told me I kept mumbling nonsense in my sleep, and it woke him up a few times. The first time was the time I remember, then it happened twice more. He couldn't really figure out what I was saying, and most of it made no sense. But he did say there were a few things that he could distinguish. First, I kept saying, don't, don't, don't. That was when he woke me up, but I have no memory of sleep talking. Then I asked him, still in my sleep, if the door was locked. At one point, I had said something like, not me, it's not me, and then I called for my grandma. Then he said that he woke up abruptly a while later because he thought he had heard me gasp or sigh loudly. It was hard for him to know for sure because he had been sound asleep. He reached over to check on me and found the empty space in the bed. It freaked him out pretty bad, not only because I wasn't in the bed, but also because that meant the source of the sound probably hadn't been me. But his biggest concern was the fact that I was missing. He had taken the revolver off the nightstand because something felt really off to him, his words. As he checked the bathroom for me, he realized Big Ben wasn't around anymore either, and that the front door was ajar. He was headed to the living room to look for me when I screamed. He said that even though he knew it had to be me screaming, it didn't sound quite like me. That there was a primal quality to it that scared him senseless. He said he felt a
Oh my
terrible sense
god.
of dread and panic when he saw that I was outside. And at first, he thought Ben was biting me, but then realized he appeared to be trying to keep me from wandering further outside. Yeah, she's definitely something.
I think it's luring her still.
Yeah, but the primal scream.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I stand by it. I think something's luring her to the woods.
I felt like I was sick after hearing his version of events. It was like this was the proof I needed to confirm that it can't be human, whatever is doing this. I know dreams and sleepwalking and talking, even night terrors, aren't proof of anything supernatural, but what I felt in the deck last night gives me a gut feeling at this point. I've learned to trust those feelings. We called Steve and let him know what happened. He said before bed he thought he heard something walk in the perimeter of his house around the time I began to wander outside. One of his cats ran along his legs and hid under his bed, waking him up. He heard screaming not long after, but in his half asleep state had convinced himself he imagined it. His dogs were all restless all night, and a few times his oldest cat looked at the window and hissed. Then I called my parents, and without letting on that things are as bad as they are, I convinced my mother to put me in touch with a distant relative who at least used to be a Cheyenne medicine man. If he can't help, he might know who can. I'll update if I hear anything from him. We checked the camera, by the way. It picked up a random deer grazing at the edge of the trees, 2 squirrels fighting, and that's it. So I feel pretty terrible right now. The cross that is thankfully still secure around my neck has me thinking about my grandma. She would have known what to do, of that I'm sure. Grandma used to tell stories about spirits, both good and not so good. Now I'm wishing I could recall better what tricks she used to keep the bad ones out and the good ones close by. Edit. I had to do a lot of pleading, but Will agreed we could stay in a hotel for one night. We're in a nice little place in Denver right now. Don't worry, it's a place where we were able to bring Big Ben and Nina with us. Danny is still with Steve, and he's giving me updates every few hours. So far, things are quiet back home. I'm just looking forward to a good night's sleep. Hopefully, getting rested up will help me face the situation head on come tomorrow. I'm gonna try to reply to as many of you as I can before I head to bed. You guys have been awesome, and I'll update again when we are back home. Edit. We are back in the house. New update posted here. This is part 5. Which we'll probably read, I think, 2 more parts, and we'll do a part 3 of the podcast. I
My
didn't realize
goodness.
there's 11 parts to this.
Oh my god.
There's no way we're getting through it in the next 20 minutes, but we'll just get through
That's
probably 2
okay.
more parts.
It's freaking me out. I'm like, this is a bad time for everybody to be out of town and it just to be me up here. I'm going to start hearing the bang against the window, or it's already, the wind is howling.
Now you're gonna start hearing smacks on the walls.
Cool. A cat just jumped out of my closet and it did sound like a smack against the wall.
Damn, as I said that too.
Yeah.
Spot on.
I just don't want smacks. Oh, here it is. The smacks against the window is what I'm scared about. Because I'm not on the first floor.
How the hell did I get on the second floor?
I don't know. Skinwalkers can be really tall.
They can be. I've seen Supernatural. They can be huge. So part 5 is titled
Homer says hey.
What's up, Homer? I've never seen Homer yet. What's up, Homer? He's pretty cute.
She's the one that crawls in the closet. Pops out of nowhere. Okay, we're ready for part 5.
Part 5 is called Will Went into the Woods Today. Typical guy. Part
Seriously.
5. I need to tell you guys a little bit more about my grandmothers. My grandparents on my dad's side were Irish. That's where I inherited my red hair. I'm of the daywalker variety, not a soulless ginger. Ha. My grandma and grampy are both gone now, but I was always very close to them. Grandma used to tell me stories, fairy tales really, about Irish spirits and such. She was an extremely superstitious woman. She had a lot of old books about charms and things that could help ward off the bad spirits. She wore a necklace, a horse amulet, all the time. I never once saw that woman without that necklace. She was even buried with it. She was also a pretty devout Irish Protestant, and her religious practices sometimes got lumped into more metaphysical ones. One time, staying overnight at her and Grampy's house, I woke up to what sounded like a door slamming. I was about 6. I recall wandering to the top of the stairs to see what it was all about. There was Grandma kneeling at the front door, reciting the Lord's Prayer while she sprinkled salt in the doorway. Somebody saw Supernatural. She saw me and told me to go back to bed, and I did. The next morning, when I asked her what the noise was, she told me the Doulahan was wandering outside somewhere. The Doulahan is basically a Celtic version of the Headless Horseman. Needless to say, I was scared, but Grandma told me she would protect me from the spirits that roamed this world. On my mom's side, my mother, or mama, was Cheyenne Indian. Uh, Now, when my mom and dad married, grandma and mima, or mama, hit it off very well. They liked to sit around talk about all of these otherworldly beings that they believed in. The Cheyenne culture and the Irish culture are, of course, very different, but somehow grandma and mama's beliefs meshed really well. I was close enough to mama as well. Her husband passed away before I was old enough to remember him. Mama was a cool person, and she smoked pipes and made her own moonshine and liked to sneak me chocolate when my parents weren't looking. She always smelled of lavender and tobacco, and and always had her long hair in a single braid which she tied with a pink ribbon on the end. Mama and Grandma both had some pretty spooky stories for me growing up, and there are some strange things, stranger than the whole Doulahan thing that I remember happening. But those are stories for another time. I'm telling you all of this because of what happened today. Will has been brooding about my sleepwalking incident since Friday. It upset him so much that he wants me to see a shrink about some anti anxiety or sleeping pills. We actually had a small argument about that when we got home today. I don't take pills unless I'm really sick, and I don't think that pills would solve all our problems anyway. Treat the symptoms, maybe. I tried to convince him that there was something else happening, and that's not my damn head. Now he's saying when he heard me sigh slash gasp in my sleep, he might have been dreaming. I can't blame him for wanting to seek out logical solutions. I just wished he'd stop sort of implying I'm imagining this. He wasn't here for the majority of these events, but we argued enough that he took Nina and went on a hike in the woods to blow off some steam. I made him take the revolver with him. He rolled his eyes at me, but at least he took it. After they left, I let Big Ben outside to do his business. He seemed a little more willing to meander about like dogs do. I sat in the back part of the deck and let him roam as he liked for about half an hour. It was sunny, and I found myself dozing off in the warmth. That didn't last long, though, because Ben came trotting up onto the deck and dropped something at my feet with a really loud clatter. It didn't do much for my nerves or mood. I sat up to pick up what he had brought me. He likes to play fetch with sticks. But when I saw it wasn't a stick at all, it was a damn deer antler. I found antlers in the woods before, but none close to the house. I was sure Ben hadn't wandered very far. It's not that weird, but given everything else that's going on, I can't help but think about it. Shit, wouldn't it be nice if the sounds I've been hearing were just some cranky stags looking for a place to shed their antlers? I let Big Ben have the antler to chew on. They make excellent chew toys for dogs, but made him come inside while he waited for Will and Nina to come back. We weren't in the house 10 minutes when someone knocked on the door. My first thought was that it was the mailman with a box, but no post on Sundays. Then I noticed Ben wasn't barking. He usually goes nuts when someone knocks. My second thought was it was Will and he'd forgotten his keys. Big Ben seems to recognize knocks of people he knows, which is pretty cool. I went to the door and opened it without thinking twice. Now, I'm not going to lie, when I saw a tall, unfamiliar woman standing on my doorstep, I freaked out a little. Big Ben stood between me and the stranger, wagging his tail like she was his best friend. She was fairly young, very pretty, with long black hair. She must have realized I was a little bit taken aback because she spoke before I could gather myself well enough to form any words of my own. I'm so sorry to bother you. My name is Jess. I've been here. I'm here because I think my grandmother might have been on your property a few nights ago. What? Uh, what's fucking terrifying is seeing an old lady just walk around your yard at night. That's spooky as fuck.
Well, she did find that long hair, so I'm like, okay, go on.
I was absolutely floored by her words. I didn't even know how to answer that. In spite of everything that had been happening lately, I did not take this stranger's sudden appearance as anything but benign. I invited her in. Big mistake. Ben was all over the woman as she followed me into the kitchen. He was licking, jumping, and pawing her. I was half afraid she was going to tell me that he had been her dog with the way he greeted her, like he had known her. I finally got him to pay attention to his new prize, the deer antler, while I got the woman named Jess a drink and sat with her at the table. I'm so sorry, she started, looking embarrassed. My grandmother lives with me and she's not well these days. She's showing signs of dementia. She wandered off sometime early Thursday morning. I found her walking back down the drive at 6 in the morning. It was only last night that I finally got her to tell me where she was. And she said she was here, I asked her. Jess nodded, looking more embarrassed than ever. She said, I went to the new house on the other side of the woods to burn the stage. I can't believe she did that. She's not been herself for a while, but this is really unlike her. I didn't know what to say, really. I was thinking about what she meant by the other side of the woods. Jess seemed to have read my mind. We live about 4 miles to the east. And your grandmother walked all the way here? She nodded. And back. I thought about that for a moment. It made sense I hadn't met them. Before we moved in, I made it a point to acquaint myself with the people who lived nearby. But to the east is thick woods and some back roads that aren't even paved. I had no idea there was anyone living there. What time would your grandmother have been here, do you think? I asked. It could have been early as 3 in the morning, Jess answered. I racked my mind to remember the timeline from the past week. Wednesday night was the first night I'd stayed over at Steve's. This woman would have been here when I hadn't been. It surely couldn't have been her making the noises. And then something made sense. She had been burning sage. I smelled the smoke of burnt sage outside the house when Steve and I had gone back the next day. I knew I had smelled that before, but I hadn't made the connection before now. Mama used to burn it all the time. Was that the only time she was here? Just nodded. I had to put the padlock on the front door after that for her own safety. I can't say how sorry I am. I really hope she hasn't disturbed you or harmed you or anything on your property. If so, I'll, of course, pay you for any damages. I shook my head. No, nothing was damaged. It's just, I hesitated. I was about to tell a stranger about the weird things that had been going on, but something made me think it was safe to talk about this. Uh, Something made me think it was safe to talk about this to this particular person. It's just since last Monday night, there's been some strange things going around my house. Jess looked a little concerned. Strange how? I told her everything. I mean, everything that's been going on. It was weird talking to the strangers sitting in the kitchen about this, but at the same time, it felt good to get it out. I finished telling her. I finished with telling her about how protective Big Ben has been lately. Jess listened intently and looked at Ben. She studied him thoroughly through his eyes. It was odd to me how passive he was towards the stranger. Jess looked at me and hesitated before she spoke again. These voices, do they call out to you? Call your name? I'm not sure. It happened when I sleepwalked. I wound up on the front deck, though, and I thought I saw something in the trees. She frowned a little. Something about her long, raven black hair and sharp facial features were very familiar. Your grandmother, is she native? I asked. How did you know? She asked. The sage, my mama used to burn it too. She was Cheyenne. Jess smiled. So was mine. So then you grew up hearing the stories. Some of them, yeah. Jess nodded and reached down to pet Big Ben's head. He accepted her touch like he'd known her for ages. Then maybe I should tell you, Jess said. Tell me what? She studied me for a moment and there was something almost fretful in her expression. I wasn't going to mention this, but given your heritage, you might not find it so odd. You must understand, my grandmother, her mind is not what it used to be. She's almost 100 years old. She wanted to come with me to see you to tell you about this herself. I don't think it was a good idea, but she insists she had a bad dream about someone else, someone close to the owner of this house, and that someone had a message. I was feeling pretty uneasy at this point, but of course I had to hear. Who was the message from? I asked. From a woman. My grandmother said it was a woman with a pink ribbon in her hair and a pipe, I think. My grandmother said the woman was holding or looking for her little red fox, Jess replied. I think I almost fell out of my chair hearing that. I tried not to show how freaked out I was, but my hands were shaking. There's only one person in this whole world who's ever called me Little Red Fox, and she's been gone for 3 years. And what was the message? I asked. Stay out of the woods. Small update. Will is back and safe. That's all I can update for now. I'm really sorry. That is part 5.
My God. You even got a message from beyond the grave. Stay out of the woods.
And then that same day, freaking Will goes into the woods.
I mean, I knew it was a bad idea from the get-go. Like, there's something out there. But let's go hiking. I need to blow up some steam because all of a sudden I don't believe you, even though I saw you randomly wake up outside. But I'm going to gaslight you now because it's nothing. That's normal.
Oh, God, that's creepy. Grandmother.
Yeah.
I'd shit myself. I would shit my pants if that happened to me.
Me too. I would not be able to stay out in this remote place. I would need, like, a bunch of people to come stay with me.
We will do part 6, and then we'll call it for this episode, and we'll do the other parts in the next episode after that. So part 6, and this is a little shorter. Big Ben is missing. I'm an emotional wreck right now, but I'll do my best with this update. I'm sorry for making you guys wait to hear the news. Yesterday, after this conversation with my neighbor, I was pretty rattled. Obviously, hearing a message from who I believe was my mama, who is dead, was just unreal. The message itself, stay out of the woods, was even more unsettling, of course, especially since Will was currently out there. Jess advised me to get him home as soon as I could and definitely before nightfall. The general consensus on here was also to get him home soon too, and to make sure it was my Will. Jess left, but we exchanged numbers before she did. We're going to meet again, and I'm going to meet her grandmother, but more on that later. With Will thinking, I possibly needed to be medicated, I decided not to overreact. I know I should have gone looking for him right then and there, but I had a while before dark and figured he'd likely be back within the hour anyway. So I followed the advice here and called him, asking him to please come back immediately so he could talk things out. Remember, we had a bit of an argument before he had left on this hike. He said he was about 2 miles into the trail and he'd turn around and come back right then. So I figured that was enough. I sat down and wrote yesterday's update while I waited and tried not to worry needlessly. Then I got an early start in dinner while I waited. Then I called Steve to tell him the latest news while I waited. Then I realized I had waited for far too long. It should have taken Will an hour to get back. The woods are thick, but he's an excellent hiker and fast. When I realized over 2 hours had passed, I got scared. I tried calling his phone when it rang until the voicemail picked up. I tried 3 more times. Texted, please call me. We usually have surprisingly decent reception out here. I knew something was wrong when he didn't answer. I called Steve back to let him know what was going on, and then I was going to go look for Will. He didn't want me going out alone, and I stayed on the phone while I watched out the window. I could see his truck coming up the road within minutes. He brought Paxton with him, his little hound mix, who was an excellent tracker, and he brought the shotgun. I grabbed my hiking backpack, which is always has emergency supplies in it: water, first aid kit, flashlight, even bear mace. Steve, Paxton, Big Ben, and I set out in the direction Will had headed on his hike. And surprise, surprise, an afternoon thunderstorm was approaching. We could hear it in the distance as he pushed through the thick brush. It could be he got turned around in here. We should yell for him, Steve suggested. Never yell for no, 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 no. I've learned that by the Appalachian Trail. Don't go yelling for your buddy. It ain't gonna be your
Don't
buddy.
respond to whistling. If they call your name, you didn't hear it.
So we yelled. Every 100 yards or so, we'd stop and yell for Will and Nina. Then we'd pause and listen. When there was no answer, we'd move on. I had a hat of Will's that Steve would periodically offer to Paxton to sniff. Paxton would nose at it and then charge ahead looking for the scent. I whistled for Nina almost constantly. If Will had fallen and was hurt, Nina was the kind of dog who would stick with him. If she heard me calling her, she would lead me to Will. After 40 minutes in the woods, the skies opened up and it beat down rain. The trees provided some cover, but it was such a heavy squall that we were soaked within 3 minutes. It was loud. The rain hammering down, combined with the occasional rumble of thunder, was making it impossible to hear much else. Steve and I had to walk side by side to be able to hear each other. I was getting upset fast. I don't know how Will could be able to hear us, or us him. I wound up pulling my emergency whistle out of my backpack and blowing it, hoping the sound would carry if Will was close by. About 10 minutes after the rain began, Steve stopped dead in his tracks and threw his arm out to stop me. I nearly collided with it. Big Ben halted at my heels and growled. "What is it?" I shouted above the rain. "Listen," Steve called back. I strained to hear, heart pounding, hoping that Steve had caught Will's voice through the storm. I heard something all right, but it wasn't Will. There was something screaming. Not words, just screaming. Like the way a panther screams. Only I know we don't have any panthers near here. It was impossible to tell how close it was with the storm distorting things, but the sound made me shake with fear. Steve and I exchanged alarmed looks. He didn't have to ask if I heard it too. My face said enough. The scream came again and again and again and again. At that point, I had a hard time believing this was happening. I honestly thought it was some deranged serial killer messing with us. Steve still held his shotgun, although it was impossible to know where to point it. The next part happened so quickly. Big Ben snarled and took off into the trees. I yelled for him to come back, and he grabbed at me, but he was too fast. Or I grabbed at him, but he was too fast. He was out of sight in seconds. I started crying and yelling for him until Steve yelled at me to shut up. He pointed to Paxton, who had taken off in a different direction. "He found a scent," Steve shouted. He grabbed my sleeve and yanked me onward, trying to keep up with Paxton. I wanted to yell for Big Ben and Will, but with the running and the hysterics, I could hardly breathe, let alone shout. I tripped on the root, hitting the ground hard, but Steve helped me back up, and we kept pursuing Paxton. We could barely keep the dog in sight, and then from nowhere, Nina was bolting from the bushes. I felt an intense relief upon seeing her. She and Paxton met and ran forward together, and there was Will. I was so relieved to see him, it made me cry even harder. He was on the ground, fully conscious, but hurt. Steve and I dropped down on either side of him. His left knee was swollen, and I knew immediately it was his old soccer injury that had taken him down. "Good to see you guys," he said. "Let's get you out of here," Steve replied. We went about helping Will wrap his knee up with a sport bandage. and I cracked open one of those instant ice packs for him. The whole time I was listening, I couldn't, hoping I wouldn't hear that scream again. I knew Steve was thinking the same. He wasn't wasting any time patching Will up. Will kept asking me why I was crying, but I couldn't tell him. I just kept saying it was okay and to worry about himself. The rain let up until it was a light drizzle. We got Will on his feet and headed back towards home, with Steve helping support him along the way. I started calling for Big Ben. Where is he? Will asked. I don't know, I replied miserably. He ran off into the woods. Steve and I exchanged a dark look. I felt so helpless and suddenly vulnerable. I didn't appreciate how safe Big Ben made me feel until he wasn't by my side. Paxton and Nina stuck close as we walked, but there was no sign of Big Ben. We thankfully made it home before dark and without hearing any other voices. Without a word, the minute we got Will into the house and onto the couch, I began packing a bag for us. Will asked me what I was doing, and I told him there was no way we were staying in that house for the night. I wanted to do a hotel again, but Steve told us we could stay in his guest room. I think the poor guy was afraid to be alone, as I was at that point. I looked at Will, expected him to argue, but he had a very dark look about him. You heard it too, didn't you? Screams, he asked, looking from me to Steve and back to me. I nodded and exchanged a glance with Steve, who looked very fearful. We both nodded. Will shook his head like he couldn't believe what he was about to say. It sounded like a wounded animal. It was close to me, very close. I felt sick. Something very bad was not messing with me, but with my loved ones now. My home and the land surrounding it was no longer safe, and I knew it. And now my best protector was missing. It sounded like something being tortured. I don't even want to think about it anymore, Steve shuddered. Do we call the police? I mean, that could have been a person, a dangerous person, Will said. And tell them what exactly, Steve pointed out. Will nodded, finally forced to admit something terrible was following us, watching us. Something that wasn't human. How did you fall? Steve asked. Right after I heard the screaming, I started booking it back. Nina was so upset. We started to run towards home when I fell over something. I dropped my phone somewhere too, and Nina scared it off, I think. She was snarling like crazy. He patted Nina's head appreciatively. I couldn't bring myself to talk about it anymore. I was too scared, upset, angry even. I finished packing a bag for Will and I. I changed out of my wet clothes and found I had cut the shit out of my knees when I had taken the fall. I patched them up pretty quickly while Steve tried to convince Will to have his knee looked at. He refused, as I knew he would, insisting the painkillers from his last injury and some ice would allow him to wait it out. We loaded up in the Jeep and got out before it got totally dark. I left the gate open to the backyard and a bowl of water too, just in case Big Ben came back. We called for him from Steve's deck for half an hour and called him throughout the day today, but he hasn't shown up. I can't stop thinking about him. I want to go looking for him, even though the idea of going into the woods is terrifying to me at this point. But you know what? I might go anyway. Big Ben would do the same for me. I've had enough of this thing, whatever it is. It's time to fight. I felt awkward about it, but I called Jess today and told her what happened Sunday after she left. She thinks I should come meet her grandmother as soon as possible, and I think she's right. I had that dream last night about something laying on my chest. It was warm, fuzzy, and comforting, just like Big Ben when he curled up in my bed with me. Only this time, when I woke up and reached out, my hand found nothing but blankets. Small update. No Big Ben yet. There are storms coming through here tonight, so I doubt he could hear me calling even if he was close. I'll be meeting Jess's grandmother tomorrow, the lady who apparently wandered onto our property last week. I don't know if she can help us find Big Ben, but hopefully she will know more about what is stalking us. Thank you guys for your kind words and positive thoughts. That's part
What's that
6.
lady gonna tell them about what's stalking them? That seems so silly.
You know what I think? You know what I'm thinking right now though? I think Big Ben is her grandmom. Her mama.
What? I don't know.
Think about it. Out of nowhere, came out of nowhere, really protective, and then all of a sudden, this grandmother, this lady, 4 miles away, gets a dream about her telling her to tell her granddaughter not to go in the woods.
I still think that whatever it was that's stalking and trying to lure her out was coming, like it's like Big Ben's mom or something was coming for Big Ben. And now they have Big Ben. And he didn't want to go because he's like, it's cushy here. I like it. This is my new home.
So you still think that Big Ben is a skinwalker?
Or he's a werewolf, but he's like the pet of a skinwalker. I still think the thing that's like stalking and luring is a skinwalker. He doesn't necessarily have to be one, but he could be. It's just that she never describes him as looking not quite right. That doesn't feel like it fits the narrative. But wolf-like. Wolf-like does. For what?
And he's big. So like
yeah. So yeah.
Well, guys, we'll leave that there for this episode. Next week, we will continue with part 7, and there are 11 parts, so that whole episode will be this story again, and we'll get to the bottom of what's happening. And
can't wait.
We'll see you guys next week.
Bye.